I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my background. I taught for 39 years, 4 years in a Catholic school and 35 in a public suburban high school in Massachusetts here. I was taught 11th grade mostly, but I was also department head, so I supervised teachers in grades 6 through 12. The focus today is on decision making. This is my passion in life, I guess. So I've got a lot of experience. If you have any questions, you can ask, because I can tell you at least what I've done in regard to those. As a teacher, I used about 60 of these per year. So I've had a lot of experience using them, and learned by trial and error as I advocate for students. Students learn better by trial and error. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a lesson, and I'm going to do the examples first, and then I'm going to talk about the theory. So as we go along, it'll be problem first, example, and then the theory, rather than the theory and then the problem. So that's going to be the format. So I'm going to bring up, I think I'm going to go off the screen, Pam. I just hit that little button there, and bye-bye. Okay, and so now if I, boom. Okay, so good enough. So decision making in history involves foresight versus hindsight. So the whole idea is for students to do a problem before they know anything about it. It's an introductory kind of activity. It relies on students' ignorance. When they know what happened, they won't make mistakes. And in fact, sometimes in my classes, they'll tell other kids, don't do that. That's going to work out badly. It's focused on teaching students how to think, not what to think. It's focused on learning by mistakes. So experience is a big factor here. I'll talk about the skills, but it's experience. If I have to pick, experience is a better teacher than I am. And it's teaching content through decision-making problems. The content is very important. This is not about cats in a tree. This is about Abraham Lincoln and whether he should desegregate the army, those kinds of things. So it's very much content-based. So we're going to talk about, these are the titles that you can find at Social Studies School Service that I've done. In U.S. history, there's 12 books. And you can ask me afterwards, like, well, what did you do on 59 on women's suffrage, or what did you do on this or that? That's completely up to you, and feel free to ask me, and I can tell you what I did. On world history, on these four titles of medieval history isn't out yet. They're not in chronological order. They're actually in the order in which I did them. So that's where we're at, working now on the Renaissance era, and then there's one more title in that series. What we're going to do today is this one, the Punic Wars. And the reason I picked that is it's very short. In a webinar, I wanted to make sure we could actually look at it without spending most of the time reading. And it's only involves 2 choices. So some of the problems are open-ended, and some of them involve 6 or 7 or 8 choices. So I felt like this would be useful in a webinar. So that's what we're going to focus on. So let's go to the first problem. I'm going to make it a little larger here. So first of all, students don't know that it's called the Punic Wars. You won't see that here. It just gives them a problem. Again, we're trying to strip away all of the cues to them so that they just have the information that the people had at that time. So I'm just going to read this, and then we're going to talk about it. So the year is 264 BCE, and you, as a Roman citizen, have a decision to make. It's interesting that it's a Roman citizen. Now, one thing I want to say about this is not role play. This is about the best decision overall. It might be the best decision for your country or the world. Sometimes it's ethical, but it's not like, how can I get what I want? It's more about what's the best decision to make. The leaders of the city of Mehsana in Sicily, so we have to hang on. Here, So that the arrow shows where Mehsana is on the map. Okay, now I'll see if I can make that larger again. Have asked Rome to help them against Carthage, powerful African city. Mehsana is not part of Roman territory, but it's an important location right on the edge of Roman territory. It is also not part of Carthaginian territory. It doesn't like being dominated by Carthage. So these, let me go back. The area we're talking about, it's the conflict area is here, in this where the green circle is. So that's where we're going to be focused. Okay, so I'll back to large. Rome's government divides power among three groups: consuls, the Senate, and the people. The Senate is split over whether to agree to help Mehsana, so the decision is left to the people. Keep in mind that sending soldiers to help Mehsana will likely lead to war with Carthage, as they already have soldiers from Carthage in Mehsana. And Rome would be taking over the city. Rome and Carthage are by far the strongest powers in the Mediterranean world, so a battle over Mehsana would be a fight to become the most powerful empire. So again, you can see the red is the Roman Empire and the purple is the Carthaginian. So let's go on back. The question is, will you send soldiers to help Mehsana against Carthage? Either yes, we'll send the soldiers, or no, do not send the soldiers to help Mehsana against Carthage. So, Pam, you're going to...
Okay, so I've launched our first poll, so if you'll answer that, please. Oh, very interesting. It seems as though we have a complete split on that, Kevin.
What's the count?
Half and half.
Okay. I feel like we're doing a presidential poll here, a sampling. Okay, so you might be asking yourself, well, wait a minute. My students don't know even enough to make a decision. And if they are, they're probably a lot like my students. So they probably don't know a whole lot, even like the basic information. So what you could do is give them some arguments. So if the students need help, they can look at these arguments, and that may give them ideas that they wouldn't have had before. So this is one strategy. Again, it's a kind of a step-by-step. You're giving them information as they need it or as you think they need it. So I'm going to make this a little larger. Okay, so here I've got 4 arguments for and 4 arguments against. I like to make them even so that it doesn't look like I'm prejudicing students. So I'm just going to read through these. So arguments 4, the 4 arguments: Mehsana is a strategic spot in the strait between Italy and Sicily. If Carthage controls Mehsana, she could stop Roman trading ships from going through the strait. And impeding those ships would decrease Roman trade, make it more difficult for Roman cities on the western side of Italy to contact cities on the eastern side. So that's one argument. 2, even if they did allow the ships through, they could control the trade. And that restriction, while it wouldn't hurt Rome directly, would hurt the cities in southern Italy, and that could impede trade among them. 3, you can be confident that if there's a war, Rome is stronger than Carthage. Very strict discipline, high moral values, and they reflect the values of the Roman people. They're ordinary people who have enlisted in the army. The Carthaginians have an army of hired soldiers. So they're using mercenaries. Only the generals were actually from Carthage. So in a war, the Romans would have an advantage. 4, a successful war against Carthage would allow Rome to expand into Sicily. The Roman Republic has gained control of all of Italy, so the next logical step is to expand into Sicily. A war will also bring new territory to Rome, increasing their military power, and bring wealth to Rome in the form of goods in conquered areas. On the downside, arguments against: Carthage and Rome are better off leaving each other and not fighting. They trade. Carthage has western Mediterranean, Rome as Eastern, and why not just keep trading? War destroys stuff. Why not just trade and get what you want that way? Two, Carthage has a very strong navy and Rome has no navy. So it's hard to defeat them when they have a navy. For example, if you surround a city, you can't starve it out. They can keep resupplying the city forever. Three, Rome should expand. If you want to expand, expand northward into Gaul. You don't need to expand into Sicily. And four, wars kill people and destroy resources. So you have to think that this is a serious thing. It's not to be taken lightly. Okay, so at this point, you would then, if you did it the way I just did it, you would have the students revote. Pam, were we going to have them revote?
We are, yes.
Okay.
So here's your poll.
We're
okay,
waiting.
guys, you'll vote again. We still have a dead even split, Kevin.
I'll bet you everybody switched. Okay, so that's sort of the format. What I want to do now is say that while I think experience is very important, and I think more important than teaching the skills are also quite important. So what do we do in terms of skills? So in each of the decision-making problems, there is one of these boxes that you're seeing on the screen. And in the box are these various skills. What I feel like, based on research on decision-making, is it's not a good idea to teach students a step-by-step process. I know that's controversial, but with research by Daniel Kahneman and others, it looks like most people in their real world don't make decisions that way. They do in the medical profession. So step one, identify what the problem is. Step two, generate options. Step three, weigh the options. And step four, pick the option. But other than medicine, fireground commanders, international chess players, teachers, department heads, do not make decisions this way. So what I think is more helpful is a list of possible skills in any particular problem, and to think of it as a menu from which a student selects. So for example, there's been a lot written, if you look down at historical analogies, about the analogies used in the Vietnam War. Two analogies dominated, the Korean War and the Munich Conference. And those analogies, I have an entire book on that, really were quite important. So if you were going to, students are making decisions on the whether to be more involved in the Vietnam War, that's going to be really important. What kind of analogies and how you evaluate those analogies. So I'm stressing that I think a menu is important. If you get it down to, Piaget says and there are 10 actual skills there. People aren't going to remember 10 skills, but they might remember 4, P-A-G-E. So it's a page analysis, and I had students who got used to page. In fact, one group of students gave me a T-shirt on it that said, "What would O'Reilly do?" And it had P-A-G-E on it. I don't wear it around because of a certain TV commentator who stole my name, but I do wear it at home sometimes. So what it shows is that students can remember some of these skills if you keep the number of items down. You may want to do fewer skills than 10. That's quite a few. What I put here is highlighting 2 of those that I just want to talk today. Before we go to those, if you look below, you can see that in each of these problems, there is an analysis of various skills. So I think there's 4 on this one. In some of them, there's 7. So again, I pick out the ones I think are important and then have some sort of analysis for the teacher who can then help the students learn. So in this situation, I've picked out asking questions. If you look at where the arrow is, ask questions about information on historical context. That's the first skill we're going to do. So we go down here, and before we look at those, question is, how do you teach that skill? If you ask students, well, what questions do you have? Two things are going to dominate. Can I go to the bathroom, and is this going to be on the next test? Sometimes some students are going to be able to ask perceptive questions, but it's not as easy as you might think. So how do you get students to think about more insightful questions? Well, one way is to give them a menu, and then they can select from that menu. So that's what we're going to do here. So here's 7 questions. It varies with the problem. These are actual questions that are in this the lesson plan for this. And what we thought we would do is have you pick. Did we say 1 or 2? We can do just 1, I think, for this. If you haven't picked 2, you always tell them that they're Irish and they can vote more than once. So we're going to have you do that now. So the questions are, why did Carthage send soldiers in the first place? 2, what's the relevant history of the struggles in Sicily? 3, has Carthage been trustworthy in the past? Has it stuck to its agreements? 4, what are the strengths and weaknesses of Carthaginian military compared to Rome? 5, how strong is Carthage politically and economically? 6, what are Roman political strengths and weaknesses? And 7, is Rome able to finance a short war, a long war? Will it bankrupt Rome? So we're going to do that now. Are people picking, Pam? Okay. It looks like people picked question 4. Is that right, Pam? Are you there? I'm thinking that we lost Pam. Okay. So we're going to do question 4. Oh. And maybe 7. This happens in my classes too. Okay, so the question is, what are the relative strengths and weaknesses of Carthaginian military compared to Rome? Carthage has the strongest navy in the Mediterranean, comprising hundreds of ships and trading vessels. After all, Carthage is a trading empire, so it depends on ships. Meanwhile, the Carthaginian army is weak. Roman legions are well trained and have greater discipline than Carthaginians. As mentioned in handout 1, the Carthaginian army is made up of mercenaries, men from other cities hired to fight for Carthage. Therefore, Rome has the advantage to defeat Carthage on land. However, since Sicily is an island, Rome will have to build a navy and defeat a great naval power. Rome's disadvantage isn't just that it lacks ships. Carthaginian sailors have experience while Rome has very few sailors. Roman sailors will have to be trained to make up for the lack of experience. It will be a challenge. So keep in mind, you have to go across water, and they have a navy. And number 7, is Rome able to finance a short war or a long war? Rome has been fighting wars on a regular basis for many years. The city has solid finances, so it can fund a short war. But this war is different. It will not be fought on the boot of Italy. It will be fought on an island against an opponent with a powerful navy. It will probably be impossible to defeat Carthage without a navy, so Rome will have to build a navy from scratch. Navies are extremely expensive, so that could cause financial problems. Rome will have to borrow money, increase taxes, or both. In addition, it's likely that this will be a long war. 2 sides have mismatched strengths. Since each side can't be easily challenged in a strong area, the war could easily become a stalemate. As the war drags out, the financial burden will increase. Okay, so now you've got your answers. Go back and revote. Which will it be, A or B? Will you send the soldiers to fight or not?
This when we are using your chat feature again, so please do use that. Well, it looks like, Kevin, that you now have 3 no's.
So someone changed their mind. Okay, so this is what happens in classrooms. So students change their minds. I've had students make arguments. I remember one time there were 21 students who voted for something, and one against. And when we heard her argument in class, they revoted, and 17 people changed their minds after an argument that she made. On another one on whether to overthrow the government of Guatemala, you could hear the groans in the classroom. There was an answer to one of the questions, and there was a lot of groaning. And when they revoted, 10 or 11 of the students decided not to overthrow the government based on the information they had. After you do the problem, you can then talk to the students about which question do you wish had been asked that you didn't hear, or which one that you heard seemed to help you to make a better decision. So now the students are weighing various questions to see what question makes a good question. It's going to give you the information you need to make a better decision. Okay, so that takes care of asking questions. The second one, which we're not going to have you revote on, is about anticipating unintended consequences. So this is really hard, and again, I think it's really important. And the question is, how do you teach students to do that? So I have some, this is not my idea, it's from Daniel Kahneman, I think, which is a PreMortem. Everybody is very good at postmortems. Something happens, and afterwards you say, ah, we should have done this, we should have done that. And wouldn't it be nice if we thought of that ahead of time? So he calls it, and I call it the PreMortem. So what you do is you take the students who have decided not to send soldiers, and they have to say, okay, it's 2 years later, and it was a disaster. And they have to write down what went wrong and why. Then the students who said they would send soldiers, it's a disaster, and what went wrong and why. And again, after having students read what they came up with, sometimes students will go, well, I never thought of that. And that can be helpful for students to start thinking about, gee, what are the unintended consequences? I've seen in our school students get into cars with somebody who had been drinking and get killed. Sometimes you don't get these, you don't get another chance. So these are really important skills to learn to ask questions about, oh, wait, what happens if this happens? So I think this is, I've seen in my classroom where this is very helpful. Okay, whoops, all right. So at this point, you're, I hope, wondering, okay, what happened? Maybe some of you have knowledge about ancient history and you know about the Punic Wars, but most of your students would not. I remember one time our school got out at 2:20 and we were doing a problem and it was 2:18, so I had 2 minutes left in the period, and I said, oh my goodness, I forgot the outcomes. I really did forget. I forget a lot of things. I do remember my wife's birthday and our anniversary though. And I said, well, all right, I'll read you the outcomes tomorrow. And the student said, go get it. This is 2 minutes to go at the end of the school day. Now, my office was across the hall, so I ran across, ran back, and read it to them. But that gives you an idea of how sometimes students can be they really want to know what happened, and that can be a big motivator. So hopefully you're on the edge of your seats, and here is the outcome. So I'm going to make this bigger. You can actually read it. So the Roman leaders decided to take action against Carthage, which is probably obvious, or we wouldn't have had an outcome. We wouldn't have a problem like this, and support the city of Mehsana. By the way, just because the people did it doesn't mean that's a good decision. Some of the decisions are amazingly good, like the Northwest Ordinance or the act to help soldiers after World War II. So some of them are great, and some of them are disasters like the Bay of Pigs. So whether they did it or not doesn't mean you should be doing it. So Rome sent soldiers to Mehsana, which led to war with Carthage, called the Punic Wars, and Punic comes from Phoenicians, and that's a group that originally settled Carthage. So there's a little fun fact for the students. Roman leaders did not apparently think through their decision. They did not seem to consider it would be a long war. This whole bring the boys home by Christmas kind of thing. In fact, the war lasted for 24 years. At first, the Romans had a number of military successes with their army. They realized they had to build a navy, which they did. They had little experience, so they decided to fight the battles like land battles. They lowered a huge plank from the Roman ship. I actually have a visual of this in the book, in the lesson, onto the enemy ships, and then the soldiers would rush over the plank and fight a land battle. And they won several battles that way. And then they lost whole fleets to storms and Carthaginian naval attacks. Historians estimate the Romans lost hundreds of ships and nearly 100,000 men at sea. The momentum of the war swung back and forth, and both sides made major blunders and then tried to compensate by buying new fleets and raising new armies. It just went on and on and on. Eventually, the Romans captured 2 Carthaginian strongholds in Sicily. Carthage was forced to leave Sicily and pay a huge amount of money to Rome, and the Romans won the war. However, the war cost Romans a tremendous amount of money and the loss, as we said, of over 100,000 were young men. Well, it was more than that because those were just the sailors. Many families faced a tragedy psychologically and economically of losing a man in the family. These were young men, fathers, husbands, and brothers that entire families relied upon for protection and livelihood. Thousands of Roman families went into poverty, and as with a lot of wars, meanwhile, some people piled up fortunes. So you had the rich getting richer and the poor, in some cases, getting poorer. According to historians, there were many reasons why Rome entered the Punic War. Among the reasons why Rome chose war were fear of Carthage, her greed in hoping to get wealth and power from Sicily, her inability to look at the risk that the war might be a long war, and perhaps most importantly, her pride. Romans assumed they were stronger than Carthaginians and would win the war quickly. Did you also make that assumption? So the question is, how do you use this? One suggestion is to take off the last paragraph. So you only give them the first 3 paragraphs, and then ask them what they think caused the war. So that's one way you could use it. The other is to look at these questions. I don't think I got them all on there. Nope. Okay. But based on the handout, why did Romans decide to take actions against Carthage? How did it work out for them? But what would you change in the way you would make decisions to improve? For example, if you didn't think about it or you made assumptions or something. So now you're asking the students to use a metacognitive strategy to think about what they just did and how they could improve at it. So that would be another way. Sometimes I'll ask students, what surprised you about the outcome? And we'll have a discussion about what really surprised them. Wow, I really can't believe, well, how could you, have made a better decision that wouldn't have surprised you? There are always going to be surprises, but I think it's important to think about the questions that are going to help students focus on their thinking. Okay. So what are the benefits? Before I go on to that, Pam, was there anything else that you think I should say about the outcomes here?
No, I think you covered that well, Kevin. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So there are a lot of benefits to this, using this approach. It engages students. They can get involved in the problems. It's got a kind of you are there feel. Students remember better what they learned in these interactive problems. So I'm a big advocate of the long-term memory kinds of things. And things really stick out in students' memories. The focus is on why things happened the way they did, not on a pile of information. Students are making sense of the motives of people at the time. So it's really important that they kind of think about why. So if you were doing the Punic Wars and you said, here's what Rome did and this is how the war started, they haven't really grappled with that. But if they have to decide, now they're focusing on, well, why did they do it? Because I know why I did it. So I think it can be helpful that way. Maybe the most important thing is it teaches humility. My students have made really bad decisions sometimes. I had quite a few students who voted to invade the Bay of Pigs in 1960, and when they found out what happened, or to overthrow the Shah of Iran, there's a big one, they were like, I don't want to humiliate them in front of the class, but I want them to feel humility. I want them to see that the people in history weren't stupid. They're just like us. They were doing the best they could, and they made bad decisions, and so do my students. So I'm trying to rid them of the 20/20 hindsight. I had one student in the class exclaim, I'm in front of everybody, oh no, I voted for Hoover. Apparently she didn't like Herbert Hoover, but she didn't know who she was voting for. It was just um, candidate A and candidate B, and she happened to vote for Hoover over Smith. And that said a lot to me about this is a good thing because she's learned that, well, maybe things are a little more complicated than she thought. It teaches contingency, so things didn't have to turn out the way they did. Obviously improves decision making, but mostly by experience, but hopefully also by targeting certain skills. And it empowers students, they get to make decisions. Okay, so that's on what I think is a plus side. On the other side is your concern. So Pam is going to give you something and you're going to vote on, like, how concerned are you on these various things. So Pam, I'll let you do this part.
Okay, so out of these 10,
Oops,
which
okay.
are, yeah, out of the 10 concerns, which would you say you'd be concerned most with yourself? And you can give us up to 3. So again, using the chat, which ones would you select? And you can just put the numbers in the chat.
Let me know when you're ready, Pam.
I'm sorry, Kevin. I have my mic off. Okay, number 6 has our biggest with,
Okay.
I believe everybody went with number 6, and then
Okay.
also 7 and 10.
Okay, very good. Okay, so I'm going to talk about all of them, but I'll try and emphasize 6, 7, and 10 a little bit more. So the first one is the problems are too complicated. And I think that is a problem we all face. No matter how you teach anything, I sometimes, when people ask me, what do you do? I'm tempted to say, I oversimplify stuff. That's basically what I do. So you would face this anyway. Unfortunately, history is really complicated, and on some things you need to know supply and demand, and other ones you need to know how deep sea diving works to see if the torpedo went in or out. I mean, it's just really complicated, and our job is to make it understandable to students. And I think I, I think you would face that no matter what you do. Number 2, they take too long. I did put in a quick motivator. So in each lesson, there's a lesson plan, and then there's something called a quick motivator, which is meant to take 20 minutes or less. They do take a long time, but I'm going to talk about how I use them, which might alleviate some concern about that. My classes are too large and get out of control. Well, I put this slide in. I feel your pain on this one. This can be a problem. So this is how I sometimes feel, like you're getting warm in the forehead and you're losing control of the class. And I don't want to minimize this because when you put kids into groups, um, chaos can happen. You got to know how to do the groups. You know, short duration, very clear, and using your presence around the room to make sure students stay in class. But it can be difficult in terms of classroom management. But you'd face those things anyway, except if you're a lecturer and kids stay in rows. Other than that, what you have here is the students focus on the board. So there is a sort of a natural classroom management tool there. When you put them into pairs, they can get off task. If the task, however, is really interesting, then they probably going to be fine. So I could have fallen off the edge of the earth and they wouldn't even notice sometimes. Okay, my students don't have the reading and thinking skills. Well, I tried to focus on that. The problems on ancient history and medieval history are geared for middle school, and in some cases you'll have a short problem and a complex problem. So the sentences are shorter, the vocabulary is a little less, the readings are shorter. I understand that. You're the expert in your room. You would know better how to gear the reading. One of my colleagues had a class with a lot of special needs students. She took the problem I had and made it into bullet points, and that worked for her. So there's no way to teacher-proof these things. We have to have a professional in there who tailors the lesson to those particular students. In terms of thinking skills, I think that all students can think, and you know, they make analogies to their friends on what movies are good and things like that. They naturally do it. They can't always put a handle on it. Oh, I'm evaluating your analogy, but they do it. They do evaluate analogies, and any parent knows that. Wait a minute, Mom, you let him do it. How come I can't do it? So they're always. I think they can think, and I don't buy that argument. Okay, students might ask questions I can't answer. That is absolutely the case. I don't know how many times they ask, and I will either send them to a computer in the classroom and say, okay, you got 1 minute, but you can't look. You can only look at this. The whole point of doing these is so that the information is controlled and they don't look up what actually happened in there. So the student comes back and says, okay, I found out that blah, 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 blah. It does change you from the almighty purveyor of information into somebody who's a fellow learner, like, gee, I didn't know that. So that's, was that one of the ones? That's one of the ones that people highlighted. You're a role model for students as a lifelong learner. That's what your role is, and I don't see any problem with that. Okay, Pam, can I click on something to put my picture up again? No,
I'm sorry, Kevin. You want to put up a picture? What?
Ah, there we go.
Yeah, there we go.
No, I did the first 5. So, okay. It's a lot of work to set the problems up and teach them. Amen to that. It is a lot of work. And that's really why I wrote the books. I thought, gee, I think people could do this. Actually, wrote the books or wrote the lessons, and then other teachers encouraged me to publish them. So hopefully this would not, in everybody's calculus, I'm a full-time teacher, I know how this works, working 60 hours a week. Everybody's calculating, wait a minute, this is going to take more time than I've got. Hopefully these lessons will help you to reorder things, and it won't be a lot more work. It looks like you're doing a lot of work every year, but once you've done one of these, the next time you use it, it doesn't take a whole lot of time because you already used it, and you will learn by experience. You'll learn, oh, wait a minute, I can't do that with these students. So it's something hopefully that can be helpful. So somebody asked, how do I go about writing them? I think I'll hold off until we get to the end, and then if you remind me, I'll come back to that. Okay, 7, I don't know how to assess them. Okay, so I can only tell you how I did the assessments. So I used Understanding by Design, and I would look at the unit and say, okay, what are the essential questions, and how am I going to assess those? So, for example, and then I would think about how do the decision-making problems fit into this. So on the Cold War, did essential question, let's say, I think it was something like assess or evaluate American foreign policy in um, in the 1940s and 50s. So it takes in a lot of these events. And I told the students, this is what you're going to be. You're going to be writing an essay on this, and you're going to have 3 examples, and you know all about that. And then I started out with the Yalta example, and then the Cold War example, and involves whether to send money, so that's the Marshall Plan, and whether to have a military alliance, and that's NATO, and so on. So it's very content-based, and those decision-making problems get at not only the content, but the rationale for why the U.S. did what it did. And that's important because that's what they're writing about. So the end of the unit assessments are done. I consider which problems to use in order to help me to do that. However, I'm also aware about formative assessments. Like, I want to know if they understand this stuff quickly. And so I would do quizzes based on the vocabulary, and they'd have to tell me what this or that means or why somebody did something. So I used them as the basis for quizzes so that as we went along, I had an idea that they actually knew what we were doing before we got to the end of the unit. Okay. We don't have much technology in our school, so I'm skipping 8 and 9. I can talk about those if you want to. Well, as you can see, I mean, this looks pretty high tech, and Pam taught me a lot on how to use this. But you could use this without any technology. You could, and I did. You could give them a handout. They can do the handout. You can use a chalkboard to calculate, and I did that many, many, many times. Then the technology got better, and then I used an overhead for maps and things like that. But if you have one computer in your classroom, you can do this no problem, and you don't have any problem if you don't have any computers. It's nice to have one there when students ask questions. So that's one factor. Okay, are we running out of time, Pam?
We are getting a little close on time, Kevin.
Bummer.
So I would skip 8 and 9 if we can, and go ahead and go to the next slide.
Okay. Okay, I got to let's see. Okay, that's a vocabulary. That is actually the last slide. That's an example of the vocabulary that students would learn if they did these Punic Wars, not just that one, but the 3 wars. So I guess I'm wondering if anybody has a question. If they don't, I can go back to 8 and 9. Oh, yeah.
That Carol said that she just used one recently without technology, and it went really well. Carol, which one did you use? And Kevin, I think this has just been so informational for us to be able to see how you've actually put these together and to really hear from you how this looks, and so it's very exciting. I see Carol has responded.
Pam had asked about somebody had asked about number 5 and how I set them up. Do we have time for that or not?
We do, yes.
Okay. So I mean, having written now 120 something of these, I guess I'm developed a pretty good skill at this. I look at a situation and say, well, okay, what's a reasonable decision that somebody could have made in here? Will it help me to accomplish my goals for the unit or this particular topic? And not real obvious ones. So, for example, on the abolitionists, like, okay, so should we be against slavery or not? That's not a workable decision-making problem. But which tactic to use? That's a reasonable decision that students. So I tended to focus on that. I looked through it. I'm actually working now on the Reformation, and I talked to one of my colleagues about it and what he's done in the class, and looking at the state standards, like what do they think is important here, and then looking at a point in history where somebody had to decide something that's relevant to the state standards, the big things that we think are important about those units. I think it's a skill that teachers can develop, and that's my answer to that question. That's how I do it.
Kevin, thank you so much. I'd like to thank our participants for joining us today. I'm not sure if you have taken access to it yet, but we have attached for you a list of all of the titles that Kevin has written, and you have access to go ahead and print those off if you'd like. At the conclusion, when you close out today from the webinar, you will be prompted to take a quick survey. We would appreciate it if you do that. And let's just see if you have any other questions or comments for Kevin. I see we saw one that says, wonderful. Thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have any questions or comments before we wrap this up for today? Okay, we're holding on, no rush.